Padua, San Antonio. Welcome, Sharon. Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. This will be my second time here in San Antonio, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to hopefully just make a little dent in some of the confusion that might be going on with God's precious children on this subject of New Age spirituality. I'm so anxious to get the word out, capital W, to get the word out to help people cut away the confusion, as Mary Jane was saying. If many of you, like me, have noticed how much New Age spirituality is creeping into every sector of our society, people approach me all the time at the talks I give across the country asking me questions like, is a medium's ability to channel spirits a gift from God? If I test the spirit and it seems like a good and loving spirit of light, then isn't it okay if I go and hear what this spiritual being has to say from the spiritual realm? Are magic, sorcery, and wizardry mentioned in the Bible? Because people have been cautioning me not to let my kids read the Harry Potter books. But, you know, it's fiction, but why would God be upset with magic and sorcery? Is a Ouija board okay if it's an angel board? So I'm not trying to contact any evil spirits, but it's an angel board. Maybe I can get an angel to speak to me through this thing. Or what about Reiki or energy healing, or crystals, astrology? So many of these things have become so much a part of our culture that I think as Mary Jane was saying, I think we've lost this sense. Perhaps a lot more teaching is needed on the subject to let people know that what's behind these practices is not the new science and quantum physics, as a lot of people will want to say. We're just now starting to understand that everything is energy and everything vibrates, and we're coming to understand the powers of the mind. It's simply amazing. These are not modern-day physics phenomenons. These are modern-day forms of ancient practices of magic and sorcery that sometimes goes all the way back to the Egyptian mystery schools and the pagan schools in ancient Babylon. So today I hope to clear up a lot of this confusion. I want to tell you about my background so you know that what brought me to Catholic Answers to begin with. I approached them and I said that you don't know me, but my name is Sharon. And my life and the lives of those around me was just torn apart as I began to learn and practice and try to live these New Age spiritualities that I learned when I was living as an actress in Hollywood, and began to embrace them and apply them to people, everyday people with real lives. It was nothing but death and destruction and divorce and abortion and depression and even loss of life that was the result. And I said, so I know the dangers of these New Age spiritualities, but what's brought me to my door, I was talking to Tim Staples at the time and some people there at Catholic Answers. I said, what's brought me to your door is the fact that Oprah Winfrey is now teaching these very same spiritualities through The Secret, Eckhart Tolle, A Course in Miracles. And so Jimmy Akin was the person who first interviewed me there, and he said, just start at the beginning and tell us what these things are and how are they dangerous. So just real quick, I'll give you this background, and then we'll move on and try and take at least some little parts of this New Age movement and find out what is authentic science and what is nonsense, and what is Christian and what is a counterfeit. Well, as I said, I was living in Los Angeles, and I started learning from this channeled spirit, Abraham. And what Abraham taught was something called the law of attraction. That's what that book called The Secret is all about from cover to cover. It teaches something called the law of attraction. And they were saying that it's a universal law. And just in a nutshell, to keep it quick, the essence of this law, supposed law of attraction, is that everything is energy, everything vibrates. Your thoughts and feelings are also forms of energy that vibrates, and good thoughts and feelings will attract good things into your life, and negative thoughts and feelings will attract negative things into your life. So if you're thinking, if you visualize and keep yourself cheerful and happy and full of joy and bliss, you can attract the perfect soulmate, a raise at your job. You can cure yourself of cancer. You can draw in, the money that you need and prosperity. But we have these channeled spirits were teaching me that you have to learn how to not allow yourself to have negative emotion. And they helped me to embrace this by telling me that in reality there was no such thing as good or bad, right or wrong. There is no sin, no evil, no hell, no devil. This spirit known as Abraham, who speaks through the woman known as Esther Hicks, said, from our broader perspective of that which you call God, we can see reality as it really is. You little humans with your little finite lives cannot see reality as it really is. So you've told each other stories and fairy tales as such you would read in the Bible, and you think there's a devil, you think there's a hell. Abraham wound up telling me, we don't know why you get all upset about something called the devil. That's a whole lot of hoopla about a whole lot of nothing. And so as I began to embrace these teachings, I did so because I thought if this was true, and of course Abraham, like all the others in New Age, would say this is the new science, quantum physicists are telling us that we've now discovered this, then I thought that I could myself and help other people learn how to harness the power of your mind and visualize what you're wanting to attract. We've said if you have anything in your life, the only reason you have it, whether it's a flat tire or your house is burned down or you've got cancer, there's only one reason you have it. It's because you've attracted it with your thoughts and feelings. So change your thoughts and you can change your life. Now, I thought I could take that teaching and go out and save the world. I thought people could help their loved ones with addictions, cure yourself of cancer, never be depressed again, have all the money that you need. And so I left my acting career and began teaching this. I did not see the horrible side effects coming. What happens to a human being when you begin thinking that I cannot feel any negative emotion, I don't want to. Abraham taught me you don't want to focus on any problems or illness. To focus on a problem only holds it in place. Abraham said to me, you remember when Jesus said, turn the other cheek? What he meant was, don't focus on a problem and look at it. Turn the other cheek and look this way and envision what you want to happen, and you can attract it. I never realized that this would make my heart very calloused, and I would very quickly become so selfish because I could no longer stand to be around suffering of any kind. And I would become frustrated with people who didn't understand. If you are suffering, you're only going to attract more of what you're trying to get rid of. And Abraham used to say, when people ask us, but shouldn't I face reality? Abraham used to say, no, never do that, not unless it pleases you in every way. They also taught me that our life's purpose was only to experience joy. Since there was no hell, no God above us who had created us, she said, what you call God is the universe, the cosmos, and the law of attraction that responds to your thoughts and desires. And your only purpose is to look out at the world and see things that you that you desire, and learn how to focus your thoughts and feelings so that you can attract it to you. So joy was our purpose. Very quickly I realized how addicting that mindset could be. I felt like I needed to be filled with ecstasy and bliss 24/7, and it's an exhausting way to live. And you can imagine, they were teaching me, it's only when you're feeling good. When you're feeling good, you're feeling God. And if you're feeling negative emotion, you've cut yourself off from the energy that creates worlds. So the answer to every problem was not to allow yourself to dwell on anything negative at all. And the end result of that for me was that I became very cold and callous and didn't want to be around suffering. I felt like I no longer needed to sacrifice. All of that was what I used to call negative energy. A Course in Miracles was something else that I got drawn into, and just very quickly, so this will just be a little bit of background for you, and then we'll start attacking parts of this and hopefully battling it with the truth. A Course in Miracles was a channeled writing where a spirit claiming to be Jesus spoke to a woman named Helen Schuckman and said, "This is A Course in Miracles, please take notes." And so she did. It took her 7 years, and she filled 3 volumes. And this spirit, who claimed to be Jesus, said that for thousands and thousands of years, we humans had gotten it all wrong about the nature of reality, about who we really are, about who God really is. We've gotten it all wrong. And the very gist of A Course in Miracles says that this whole world that we're living in is nothing but an illusion. A long time ago, at the very dawn of time, mankind fell into a very deep sleep, and this is all a psychic nightmare that we're having. And yes, this is what A Course in Miracles teaches. And this Christ consciousness who claimed to be Jesus said that in order for humanity to wake up from this psychic nightmare, we need to convince ourselves of the supposed truth that there is no sin, there is no wrongdoing, there is no condemnation. They say there is no condemnation, for God has never judged. You have to realize that there is no hell, no sin, no wrongdoing. No forgiveness is ever necessary because no wrongdoing is ever committed. And when you hold to that mindset that all there is love, and this is all an illusion, and in truth, they say, we are at home in paradise with God and we never left. And the more you can get yourself to believe that with a lesson a day for 365 days, by the end of those 365 days, you will have raised your own vibration and the vibration of those around you. If enough people do this, the entire race of mankind will wake up from this psychic nightmare that we're having and discover that we're still at home in heaven and we've never left. We are all one, and this one is God, and all there is love. Now I ask you, what do you think happens when you begin to apply those kinds of principles to real people with real lives? The miracles they promise you never materialize. What happened instead, I began to apply these lessons, let's say, to my very good friend Jane. And so what happened is what brought me crawling back to the Catholic Church on my hands and knees. And that journey back did indeed begin with Jane. When she came to me and was asking me about end-of-life issues, she said to me, you know, for example, if I wanted to end my life, is it a very grave wrong? Is it a sin? Would God be upset with me? Would I go to hell, and would my family be devastated? And so I answered her almost word for word according to what this channeled spirit Abraham had said in their little booklets that I got weekly and monthly. So from that very recorded material from this channeled spirit, I said to her, okay, Jane, I'm glad I will finally be able to awaken you to the truth. Is it wrong? According to Abraham, every death is a suicide, they said, because we all in charge of when we decide to reemerge back into the non-physical. That's what they called it. They said, it's not wrong. You've only been, because there is no good or bad, right or wrong, you've only been conditioned by society and by religious institutions. You've been conditioned to think it's wrong. And would your family be devastated? Well, they would only be devastated if you visualize them that way, because you create what you think about. So if you think they'll be devastated, they would be, but you could also visualize them being supportive and create that instead and attract that. And I said, last of all, is it a sin? Would God be upset with you? There is no heaven or hell, good or bad, right or wrong. Would God be upset with you? And I quoted to her Abraham's words, this that you are calling God, that which you call God, is nothing more or less than the law of attraction and the universe that responds to it, and you are free to attract anything that you desire, even death. And so she thought about this for a while, and then she went ahead and went to bed that night. It had gotten very late. She spent the night at my house. She woke up the next morning, left my home, checked herself into a hotel room, and drank poison until she died. All by herself, sitting on this hard, cold floor in the bathroom. And I remember when my husband came in, who was my boyfriend at the time, came in and said, "Jane is gone." And I said, "Yes, I know she's gone. She spent the night, she just left." And he said, "No, you don't understand. Jane is gone. She's killed herself." And in that moment, this is how, and I want you to know this is how the devil works, and this is how the devil's influenza, when he influences us, it's usually right down the line. In more cases than I care to recount, it's usually only when it's too late that we realize the mistake that has been made. I remember God's grace at that moment let me feel how sad she had been, and why hadn't I recognized that? My first words to him were, "Oh, she's so sad. She was so sad." And I've often told people, I had someone at her memorial service ask me, "That last night that you were with her, why didn't you hug her, tell her that you loved her, and that you would miss her if she was gone?" And I didn't even have the words to explain to her that looking back on it, I now realize I was no longer seeing Jane as a person. Everything was about energy and vibration, and about what would be attracted and what could be created to fuel my bliss so that I could have a high vibration. I often tell people, looking back, all of my oughts and noughts were just erased. They were no longer there. And I look back and I realize these are the side effects and the horrible consequences that people just don't see coming with some of these New Age spiritualities. Take, for example, and you're going to hear in the second part of my talk, you're going to hear about how God had forbidden so many of the practices that I had been dabbling in and engaging in. The very things that I thought were going to make me a more loving, compassionate person were the very things that brought death and destruction, abortion, divorce, it was hell on earth. I thought that I was teaching people how to experience heaven because I was teaching that all there is love, and really what I was helping to bring about was hell on earth. And so we know who's at the bottom of that. I look back now and think about Ephesians, St. Paul telling the Ephesians, and he told them, he said, "Remember, our struggle is not with flesh and blood, but with the principalities, with the powers, with the world rulers of this present darkness, the evil spirits in the spiritual realm." That is who is behind all of this. It's a replay of that same lie in Genesis. Did God really tell you that you can't eat from every tree in the garden? Instilling that doubt. You know, I can almost imagine that serpent saying to Eve, "It's not that you can't eat of every tree. You've only been conditioned, to believe that you can't eat from every tree." It's always a repeat of that same lie. So practices like the horoscope, astrology, crystals, the Enneagram, channeling spirits, going to a medium, magic, sorcery, casting spells, wearing certain charms, or wearing charms, period. I say certain charms because lately people have been asking, can you tell me the difference between a sacramental and a charm, as we were talking about earlier? And you'll learn the difference. But take, for example, the point is that God had forbidden these practices from the very beginning, going all the way back, not just in the New Testament where we read in Acts that after Paul had taught them the true Word of God, instead of the false teachings that were going around, the people in that area burnt their magic books. They burned their magic books because thanks to Paul they realized that they should not be doing this, which God had forbidden. But not just in the New Testament, going all the way back to Deuteronomy and Leviticus, God had forbidden these practices. And he said, because you will be defiled by them. And that word defiled has so many layers. The original meaning just means that you will become unclean by coming in contact with that which is unclean. But the deeper meaning is it is going to twist you and distort you and make you into something that no longer resembles the image of God. And this is how the good angels were distorted and twisted until they became demons. You're going to experience the same fall, so do not do these things. Well, one of those things that was forbidden was this thing called divining. Let there not be a sorcerer, a magician, a wizard, or a diviner among you. And you think, well, what is divination? Divination is, and again, it's this ancient practice, but we see people doing it today and calling it the new science or the power of the mind, or the fact that all energy vibrates so we can learn how to read the energy. And it's none of those things. It's divination. It's when a person is seeking to gain hidden knowledge from invisible forces or entities. We're going to talk a lot about that in the second part of this talk. So this would be like if you use a crystal to find out if the man you're dating would be a good husband. And if the crystal swings to the right, the answer is yes. If the crystal swings to the left, the answer is no. It would be fortune telling, reading the lines on your palm, consulting your horoscope. These are all forms of divining. Reading tea leaves. You know, gee, I don't know whether or not I should sell this house. Okay, well, let's read your tea leaves and we'll see if this is a good time for you to buy or sell or stay put. Now, when people find out that God had forbidden this from the very beginning, they don't often know why, and it's only I had rock solid evidence from my own experience. I saw with my own two eyes how dangerous this stuff can be. We are not to be seeking guidance from hidden forces and entities in the spiritual realm, because any entity in the spiritual realm helping you to gain knowledge from this forbidden practice would not be a spirit of God, and so therefore any information they give you is meant only to harm you and deceive you and mislead you. And that just adds vile, malicious hatred to the mix. They hate us that much that they're going to tell you whatever they have to tell you to get you to suffer, and they'll be happy when they do it. So here I am with Jane that evening, and before we went to bed that night, and I had told her, you know, no such thing as good or bad, you're free to attract anything you want, even death. And I saw that she was not quite on board with this, or she looked sad or forlorn, or like she couldn't wrap her mind around this, and I got frustrated, and I said, listen, Jane, if you don't believe me, maybe you'll believe the universe. So let's ask the universe. And she says, ask the universe, and as if the universe is God, which, by the way, in P.S., the universe, the cosmos, is not God. The universe and the cosmos is a creation of God, the creator. But God is God, and the creation is the creation. And this cosmos is not going to tell you anything. God is the one who wants to help lead us and guide us and direct us. So I tell Jane, we'll ask the universe. She said, how do you ask the universe? I said, we'll pull a rune stone. And she said, well, what's a rune stone? I said, okay, just real quick. And there's tons of this kinds of stuff. There's, burning smoke and seeing which way the smoke rises or wafts. But this was rune stones. And what this is an ancient pagan practice where there's these little stones in a bag. Each stone has a symbol on it. You ask a question, and then according to the symbol, you know what to do. For example, an arrow straight up would be yes. An arrow pointing down would be no. A wavy line would mean that's going to cause a lot of commotion. A straight line would mean don't do anything. Stand still. Just don't do anything yet. So you're going to get guidance from these rune stones because the universe is going to speak to you through these stones. So I said, okay, Jane, your issue. End of life issues. Suicide, yes or no, good or bad, right or wrong. I reached into the bag and I said, look, Jane, it's death. And it was. It was the death stone, a big 0. And I remember she pushed herself away from the table and she said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. This is really frightening me. And then she went to bed that night. But you see, we have those tiny, tiny windows of opportunity where, as a Christian, if we know the truth and we know God's Word and we know who is God and who we are and how precious life is, and that each one of us is a precious child of God. In that, if you, and you see, part of my message is that you can't go back. I can't go back. I cannot undo what was done. I can pray for Jane's soul now, and if God is as merciful as I know him to be, then he would have mercy on her soul, because she was really asking, and it was the person, a mortal sin, you have to know it's a sin. You have to, it's through, if you do something that's a mortal sin, but through no fault of your own, there has to be that knowledge there. And I pray for the mercy for Jane's soul and for my own soul. I was just on that highway to hell where I would never be home with God our Father and the angels and saints if I'd stayed on that path. So it's only a miracle of God's grace that I was able to come out of that and go to confession and now see the light. But that didn't happen until I once again took these principles and applied them to someone else. These practices of New Age spirituality, which really there's nothing new about it. It's just a new way of practicing old heresies. It's a new way of practicing ancient pagan methods of magic and sorcery and wizardry, which has been forbidden by God from the very beginning. I took these principles and practices and started applying them to someone else. What I started to say was they do cause spiritual blindness. And I can verify this right now with this part of my story. You would think that Jane would be the last casualty, the last person to fall from this horrible devil's influenza, is what I call it now, the devil's influence. But only for a second did I feel how wrong it was and that she had been so sad, and why couldn't I have seen that? And for a split second, I thought I'd remembered something from long ago, old Catholic school days. God writes his laws on our hearts. He writes his laws on our hearts. So I'm feeling now how wrong this is and how sad she was. And my world I was on tilt, because which truth is true and what just happened here? And I had so much invested in this new way of life. Just that quickly the veil came down again. I did not exit New Age at that point. Not until just that quickly it was over. And I decided that I would turn my attention to something else. And I remember this channeled spirit known as Abraham used to say to us, if you feel devastated by something you've done, with your new learning of the law of attraction and energy and vibration, if you feel sad and sorrowful and depressed and devastated over something you've done, please just know it's only because you are just not used to your new orientation. This is going to take some time for you to get used to this new orientation, because after all, they've told you for centuries that it's sinful and it's wrong and you should feel guilty and there's a hell and there's a devil. So this is going to take some time. You're just not used to it yet. So just that quickly, I kept going on my New Age path. I then applied all these New Age principles to my own brother, who was experiencing a downward slide, drugs, alcohol, psychological ailments that had never been diagnosed or treated. And so when he was hitting rock bottom, after my parents had tried to do everything for decades, now it had got to the point where there was only a few people that he would listen to. And I started applying all these principles instead of getting him the help that he needed, and prayer, and getting him to church, and perhaps medication that could have leveled him out, or calling the authorities so that he could have been protected or protect people around him. Instead of doing any of that, when the only few people he would listen to came to me for advice, I was giving them advice according to A Course in Miracles. I just wanted to tell you real quickly what lessons from A Course in Miracles I was applying to my brother. Lesson 101, you need the practice periods today. The exercises teach that sin is not real, and all that you believe must come from sin will never happen, for it has no cause. Say, God's will for me is perfect happiness. There is no sin, it has no consequence. And I kept saying this to the people who were listening to him. You can't focus on it. If you focus on his problems, you'll only hold it in place. I remember telling my mom, she would say to me, he's not eating, he's not sleeping, he's not changing his clothes, he's starting to talk about some pretty dark stuff. What do we do? And I remember I was so frustrated with her. This is how it hardens your heart. I had no compassion for the situation. I said to my mom, doubling her sorrow as she saw her own son self-destructing before her very eyes, I said, listen, everything that you report to me about what's going on with my brother, all that's happening is for one reason only. Whatever you're seeing in him, it's what you're attracting. It's what you're vibrating, and it's what you're attracting. I went on with the lessons. After all, Mom, the Holy Spirit says you cannot either hurt or be hurt. Your brothers need to hear this. Perceive only this need in them, and do not respond to any other. Because to respond would be to hold it in place. The very last one, Christ's vision is to see your brother as sinless. Do that, and you will be released entirely from all effects of sin. So the miracle that they promised us, all we would have to do would be to take our attention away from it, visualize something that you want to attract, and you could create that instead. That was what they promised us. But the miracle they promised us never materialized. Instead, what happened made headlines in the small town where I grew up, and one of the media, one person from the news media, I'll never forget, reported it this way because the image just stayed with me. She said, on a cold winter's night, my brother left his girlfriend screaming in a parking lot as he grabbed their 4-month-old son from her arms and took off with him into the night. Later that same evening, he was seen coming out of the bushes with an empty baby stroller and a shovel. It didn't take very long before my parents got that inevitable phone call that the baby was gone, was dead, had been smothered. My brother was arrested for the alleged murder of his own 4-month-old son. He's now serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. And no amount of visualizing can bring that precious little baby, that little child of God, back, or ease the suffering of the little mother, which was her very first child. And I will never get to see my brother again on the outside. And sometimes I think, all of these things were designed, the spirits told us, to free us from the social conditioning that kept telling us that this was wrong and this was bad and this is a sin and you can't do this. All of these lessons designed to bring us freedom, and everything they told us to do took away our freedom forever. I think of Marianne Williamson's voice teaching these lessons, a lesson a day for 365 days on Oprah Winfrey's Sirius satellite radio show. She's been doing it since 2008. We're now in 2012. So millions of people have been taught these lessons. And I can hear Marianne Williamson's voice saying that, see your brother as sinless and you will be released entirely from all the effects of sin. And I thought, if she could only go with me and visit him, those first couple times when I would visit him, according to the law as it now stands on our books, he's serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. If she could go with me and visit him, and through that glass, hear him and see him, that he talks about how happy we're going to be when he comes home. How good it's going to be when he comes home. So he can't even quite grasp the fact that he won't be able to come home. And I don't want this to happen to any one of my other brothers and sisters. Now watch this. If I had known my faith, this is what I'm hoping all of our good Catholics need to get back into this teaching of what God our Father had told us from the very beginning. Back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, I start by telling people God our Father loves us so much. He only forbids that which will hurt you. He only forbids those things that even if you feel like you're living it up, while you're doing it right now eventually would take you away from him. So even if you're living it up now and you don't see the harm in it, how are you going to feel when you find yourself in eternity and you cannot come home? And you think to yourself, how happy we would all be if I could come home to God, my Father, brothers and sisters, the angels and saints, and you can't come home. Because sin does have very real consequences. This is why God forbids certain practices. Because someone's going to get hurt, or it's going to wind up taking you away from him. So look at these scriptures going all the way back to Leviticus and Deuteronomy. In Leviticus we read, "Do not go to mediums or consult fortune tellers, for you will be defiled by them. I, the Lord, am your God. Should anyone turn to mediums and fortune tellers and follow their wanton ways, I will turn against such a one and cut him off from his people." And I tell people, I had to look up that word wanton. What it means is, if you listen to their advice and follow their wanton ways, you're going to find yourself cut off from God and cut off from God's people. Because what wanton means is unrestrained, recklessly arrogant, malicious. He had told us not to go to mediums or consult them for advice, and he knew that this evil spirits in the spiritual realm are anxious to guide you and give you information and lead you down the wrong path. Because they hate us, they want to destroy us, and they want to take our salvation from us. The next one in Deuteronomy says, Deuteronomy 18:10, "Let there not be found among you anyone who immolates his son or daughter in the fire. Let there not be among you a fortune teller, a soothsayer, a charmer, a diviner, or a caster of spells, nor one who consults ghosts and spirits," as I was consulting the spirit known as Abraham. "Let there not be one among you, one who consults ghosts or spirits, or seeks oracles from the dead. Anyone who does such things is an abomination to the Lord." And right there, I always take the opportunity to clear up what does that mean, because it's not God looking at his precious children and calling you an abomination. You disgust me. That's not it. An abomination, when you look at the definition, what an abomination is something that is so catastrophically different from what it ought to be, from what it was intended to be. Something is an abomination when it is so dangerous in the sense that it is so contrary to God's nature. That's what an abomination is. God did not want you to become that. And so he said, don't go to fortune tellers and mediums, and don't practice magic and sorcery. I did not know that this law of attraction that I was practicing was magic or sorcery. They told me it was energy and vibration, and that the quantum physicists were telling us, we've discovered this about this energy. You can manipulate it. It has a magnetic property. I can tell you right now, the energy of things does not have a magnetic property. We do not create our own reality. You are not attracting anything by virtue of your thoughts or feelings or how you're visualizing. All of that is a lie brought to people through the teaching of demons who lie because they follow their father, who is the father of lies. St. Paul told us, he told Timothy, in the end times, people will turn from the faith, and they will follow instead myths and legends and the doctrines that demons teach. So he knew that these demons teach through human beings. That's why I call it the devil's influenza. It's his influence. As people are influenced by Satan, you are led into sin. But most people, now see, watch how what I was doing was magic and didn't even know it. It says, let there not be found among you a charmer. What is a charmer? I looked up the word charmer. This is in the New American Bible and in their commentary, which the New American Bible is the Bible that's used in our liturgy, so you know you can trust it. And it says, let there not be a charmer or a diviner or a caster of spells among you. You look up charmer, and what it means to charm is to attract. Let there not be one among you who thinks that he can charm the man of your dreams or abundance or a new house or a cure. I can attract these things. That is being a charmer, and I never even knew it. And sure enough, when you start practicing the law of attraction, it twists and distorts your psyche, your mind, and your heart, and makes your heart calloused. You lose your compassion. I became more like an animal than humane. So these scriptures are all in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Remember, I said these things are magic and sorcery. Most people don't know that magic and sorcery is listed in Galatians and in Romans and in the book of Revelation. Magic and sorcery is listed as a work of the flesh. Those of the flesh cannot please God. Those who live by the flesh will die. The desires of the flesh give birth to death. Haven't we seen that in my experience? So read what this says here in Galatians. Now the works of the flesh are plain: fornication, impurity, licentiousness. That's giving yourself license to do anything you please, because there's no such thing as good or bad, right or wrong. It's only what you desire. If somebody else wants it, let them choose it. They have the right to choose it. Okay? That's licentiousness. Works of the flesh: licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, selfishness. Wait, back up. Sorcery? Sorcery is a work of the flesh? Yes, and it's a mortal sin. I warn you, those who do such things, says St. Paul, I warn you, those who do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. Now go down here to the book of Revelation. This is what really got me. If you look in different translations of the Bible, another word for sorcerer or sorcery is magic. Magic and sorcery, it means the same thing. It means trying to harness the power of the universe or hidden invisible elements. And a lot of times people think that what they're harnessing in order to either attract or create what they want with this magic and sorcery is God power, life force, God force. The very energy of God, we can tap into it and harness it and create what we want with it. That's what's being taught right now in our society, and they don't realize that it's magic and sorcery. You want to stay away from magic and sorcery because, listen to what it says in the book of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 22, John writes that outside the gates of the heavenly city are the dogs, the sorcerers, the unchaste, the murderers, the idol worshippers, and all who love and practice deceit. Revelation 21, the very next chapter, goes on to say, as for the cowards, the unfaithful, the depraved, the murderous, the unchaste, the sorcerers, idol worshippers, and deceivers of every sort, their lot is in the burning pool of fire and sulfur, which is the second death. In 1 Samuel we read, rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. So we know witchcraft is a sin. We know rebellion is a sin, and now we find out that witchcraft is also. In the New American Bible, that scripture says, a sin like divination is rebellion. So God did not want us to practice these things. This is magic and sorcery. Another word for it is wizardry. The teachings that go along with these things are so morally defiled. Anytime I've ever seen magic and witchcraft and sorcery and spells and charming, anytime I've ever seen it taught, right along with it, you will hear there's no such thing as good or bad, right or wrong, no heaven or hell, it's all good. God is energy. He wants you to tap into this energy so that we can all have pleasure. If you get it wrong, you have 1,000 lifetimes to come back and get it right. Abraham used to say, don't ever worry about anything that you're doing. It's all good. You can choose whatever you desire. You can't get it wrong, and you never get it done. That's what Abraham used to say, because they would teach us that you just keep coming back and coming back. But in Hebrews, we read that man lives once, and when he dies once, and then the judgment. We will be judged according to whether or not we have kept God's laws. Now, when you read this about magic and sorcery and how it will keep you out of the kingdom of God, doesn't it make you wonder how so many people are being told that it's okay to read Harry Potter? When I started looking into the Harry Potter books, This was my own take on it. I'm giving you my take on it based on my experience in so many New Age practices. When you look at the Harry Potter books, the hero is a wizard. They learn all about magic and sorcery. This is a good thing in the Harry Potter books. You want to learn magic and sorcery. You want to learn how to cast spells and how to work that magic. They learn charms. They wear charms. They do consult spirits from the dead. It's all there in those Harry Potter books. When I picked up one and I said, I just want to make sure I'm not going off the deep end. I just want to make sure that I'm not a woman with a hammer, and to a woman with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I'm just going to, I said, so I'm just going to pick up this book, and I just opened it at random. This was just standing in a supermarket with the Harry Potter book. I opened it up, and it was his report card from the Hogwarts School of Sorcery and Wizardry, and he was being graded on casting spells, divination. He got an A. Wizardry, magic, charming. So let me make my point. The hero of the book is a wizard. It's good to learn magic and sorcery, learn how to cast spells, perform divination. There is no way that I would bring that book into my home for my little girl to read. And when people ask me why, I say, because God told his children, let there not be among you a wizard or a sorcerer. And then, so here, I want you to be able to defend against this argument. People will say to me, but it's just a book. It's not real. It's fiction. It's not, I'm reading here like the arguments I get. Not one kid reading those books thinks it's real. Not one kid is going to go out there and thinks that Harry Potter is really riding around on a broomstick. And they're not going off to learn how to do magic spells. They're just reading about Harry Potter, and it's all fiction and none of it is real. And I said, but you guys have to understand, every story has a message. Every story teaches. Even stories that don't intend to teach you anything will teach you something when you come away from reading it. And you're telling me it's just fiction. No, this is how I tell people, let's get this in perspective. So based on that argument, that it's not real, it's just fiction, so it's okay to do the magic, the sorcery, the wizardry, casting spells. Harry Potter is a hero to millions of kids. This is all okay, it's fiction. I say, okay. So using that argument, that means that you think it would be okay if I gave a book that was just fiction, it's not real, gave this book to my little girl to read, and it's all about a little, okay, let's say a Martian child, a little Martian girl named Hannah, and she's a prostitute, and she goes to a school to learn how to be a really good prostitute, and her name is Hooker Hannah. But it's not real. It's all fiction. This is on another planet. This is on Mars. There's nobody really who really lives named Hannah. Okay, and in the book, she learns the message from the book is that to be a loyal friend and to have courage and to be a leader and to be a hero and to stand up for what you believe in and to fight for what's right. That's the message of Hooker Hannah. And then and in the brothel where she lives, she's a hooker with a heart of gold. And then when I tell people this, they say, no, I would never give that book to a child. That's ridiculous. That's craziness. And I said, why? And they said, because that's wrong. Prostitution is wrong. It's a sin. People get hurt. And I said, there it is. There it is. Not enough Catholics know that magic and wizardry and sorcery is just as wrong as something like prostitution, and just as many people get hurt. There it is. Okay, now let's look at something in just these few last remaining moments that we have. For example, let's take a look at yoga, the arguments that we get about yoga. Many Christians are wondering, can I do yoga even if I don't believe all that Hindu spiritual stuff? Can I do yoga if I'm only doing it as a form of exercise? What's wrong with that? And all you have to know, I'll just give you this example before we wrap it up, and we'll start taking questions about all kinds of things, like the Enneagram, if you're wondering, or Reiki, or energy, spiritualities, healing touch. We'll talk about all of that. But let me just give you an example. And all of you have this in your sheet to take home. If you look at what St. Paul taught on the subject of eating meat that's been sacrificed to idols in a temple, back in his day, there was this big controversy. The Christians were coming to St. Paul and saying, can we eat that? People are giving me a hard time because I'm eating this meat from the pagan temple that's been sacrificed to idols. But I'm a Christian. I know it's just meat. And I'm not offering it to any idol. I'm just hungry. I'm just eating meat. It's just meat. So can't I do this? St. Paul answered those questions. You all have it to take it home with you. In 1 Corinthians 8, 1 Corinthians 10, in Deuteronomy 32, there's a good note there, and Romans 14. He explained. I've only got 30 seconds, so I'll just wrap it up real quick with this. In 1 Corinthians 8, when you read it, when you go home and read it tonight, you'll see that he was telling them, I see what's happening here. You have a distorted sense of liberation. As a Christian, we know that we have our freedom. We are free to choose between that which is good or bad, right or wrong. He said, but you have a distorted sense. We are free to do all things, but not all things are good for us. He said you should avoid doing something that might harm someone else. In the next scripture, 1 Corinthians 10, if somebody, or it might be Romans, if a Christian sees you who has knowledge, he said, sitting in a pagan temple eating meat that's been sacrificed to idols, even though to you it's nothing, what might he be thinking? Might you harm his conscience? And then he went on to say in 1 Corinthians 10, you have to remember, think about what communion is, because that meat had been sacrificed to an idol in order to effect communion with their gods. He says, communion with Christ is incompatible with any other communion. He says what they're sacrificing, they sacrifice to demons. And I do not want you to sit at the table of the Lord and at the table of demons. I don't want you to drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. He was basically saying, what are you doing? No, can you go home and eat your veggies, but don't eat this stuff. Because now why should someone understand that what happened with that meat being sacrificed to idols is what's really happening with yoga? Is because even though Westerners are doing yoga just for exercise, we get it, I get it. That does not change what yoga really is. Yoga, to the Hindu people and to some of the other Eastern non-Catholic religions like Buddhism, yoga was designed to help the person doing it make it easier to become united, to become yoked. That's what yoga means. It means to be yoked. To make it easier for you to become yoked to their God. To their God. That's what yoga is. So that's one reason I would never want to do yoga to begin with, even using it as an exercise. I just really wouldn't want, to me that would be like saying I'm using opium as a sleeping pill. Why not? You know, it works. I know the dangers of drug abuse, and I'm don't want to become an addict, but why not just I would never use opium as a sleeping aid for that reason. Now, later on when we take questions, I have 2 websites that you can go to where you can get regular stretching exercises that have nothing to do with yoga. And the stretching exercises will help lower back pain. It'll help your concentration. It gives you energy, makes your muscles firm. Stretching exercises that have nothing to do with yoga. And I do have those right here. Those 2 places, one of them is called the mayoclinic.com, and the other one is sportsinjuryclinic.net. So we'll end this just by ending on what Mary Jane first told us. I do believe that's what's necessary is more education for today's Catholic as to what God taught us. Later on when we take questions, someone please remind me. I want to read to you what the Catechism of the Catholic Faith has to say about divination, clairvoyance, astrology, palm reading, all of these different forms of magic and sorcery, right out of 2 little paragraphs in the Catechism of the Catholic Faith. So we know that this isn't just Old Testament stuff and Jesus is of the New Testament, so none of that matters. Oh, it does matter, because the Catechism of the Catholic Faith is upholding it 2,000 years later. So we'll end here with what Mary Jane first said, with this thought. What is a Catholic to do? There are so many muddied, distorted, I would say defiled conceptions, different concepts, different conceptions of who and what God is. Many, many, many out there in our society today, but you know what? There's only one immaculate conception. And she can be found in the Catholic faith. And she is the one who leads you to the one true God through her Son, Jesus Christ. So we know where to go for the truth. Be careful out there and stay Catholic. It's worth it. Thank you. Thank you.